Investment committee meetings are a great place for plan sponsors to discuss the latest trends in defined contribution plans, from investments to plan design to communications and education. And joining me now is Cammack Retirement Group consultant Jennifer Stevens. Jen, thanks for joining us on the show today. Communications and education, I know this is an area that you really focus on. And you know, in our committee meetings, we've seen at Cammack, we've seen kind of a migration. Investments are still important. Fees are obviously important. We just talked about this. But those are more foundational elements. And now it's about retirement adequacy and retirement readiness and get people prepared. That takes communications and education. And more, those are becoming topics of greater time commitment in committee meetings, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely, yeah. So the focus in the industry right now is largely moved to retirement readiness, participant outcomes, and as such, we're getting lots of questions on plan sponsor about how can we design our plans to really encourage participation and, you know, just get our employees engaged. So one of those routes is really communication and education. I mean, there's a few things you can do in your plan design to really, you know, encourage participation, encourage increasing your deferral rates. But in the end, communication and education plays into that in all aspects.
In terms of plan design, you mentioned that that's also a foundational element. You've got to get success, have a successful plan, you've got to have a solid plan design. And many of these plans were set up and still remain the same way since their inception date. But you're having active conversations involving concepts like auto-enrollment, auto-escalation, future enrollment. Discuss a little bit about how you go about having those conversations and what those conversations are like with clients.
Yeah, so when a plan sponsor brings up to us in an investment committee meeting, we need to get our employees engaged. That's one of the first things we talk about because it boosts participation immediately. So when we're talking about auto features in general, an auto enrollment program is extremely helpful because what it does is it defaults your participants into the plan. And as we know as consultants and advisors, inertia is a very powerful force in retirement plans. We know that most participants don't take action unless they have to. So defaulting them in, let's say you default them at, you know, a 4% deferral rate, for instance, is a great start. We also find, though, that if you do that, you're kind of using inertia to your benefit to get them enrolled, but because of that same force, they don't change their deferral rate. So while you're getting them in and you're increasing your participation rates, deferral rates are still low because you're at that, in this case, you know, example, 4%. What we find is that an auto-enrollment program is much more effective if it's used in tandem with an auto-escalate program, which increases a deferral at a certain percentage once a year, for instance. So, you know, you could auto-enroll your participants at 4%, and increase 1% every year until they reach 10. That would be significantly more effective at boosting your numbers and helping your participants get to that readiness.
But in terms of auto-escalation, auto-enrollment, one of the challenges or one of the barriers is from the finance department that says my cost is going to go up. And you know, I've been thinking about that. We've been dealing with this since the Pension Protection Act became law in 2006. From your estimation, how do you handle that challenge? That's a hurdle you got to clear. Any thoughts on addressing that issue, which is a valid issue? It's going to cost me more today to pay for the plan if I have more people in the program. Yeah,
it's true, and it actually, on the other side of it, or I guess maybe on the same side of it, if you offer an employer match and you're trying to get people in, you're going to be paying even more for that. So it's a conversation for an investment committee. Usually we do have finance represented on our investment committees that we work with. It's a tough conversation to have, and what we need from our plan sponsors is to come with a budget in mind and to weigh the pros and cons there. Sometimes there's just no budget for some of these things, but it is a necessity if you want your employees to be ready for retirement. And kind of speaking on that employer match situation, it's another way to use your plan design. If you have a budget for an employer contribution, if you structure it as a match where you're telling your employees you have to contribute in order to get money from the employer, you're also helping to encourage participation. So you have to be thoughtful as well. So while we're in these committee meetings, let's say that 3% is what they think that they can give to their employees. As we talk about the formula, 100% of the first 3, for instance, will come up, and we'll say, okay, well, that will be great because you can get people into the plan at 3%. That boosts participation right away if you offer a match. But what you want to think about is how can you be getting your participants to be successful? And it's something called stretching the match, which means pretty much giving the same amount from an employer perspective, but requiring your employees to give more to get that amount. So for instance, in this example, instead of 100% of the first 3, maybe you offer 50% of the first 6. So these are the conversations that we're having. It is a budget issue, though, and so they're long conversations, and you have to involve finance, and you have to get you have to get the support of the committee members.
But one concept that maybe they haven't considered is the cost for that employee to stay on longer, because that person typically would be paid more money. So if they work beyond their retirement years, they're not prepared, there's more money that goes towards their salary, and it also gets in the way of another individual kind of fulfilling their role and responsibility as and as that person moves off into retirement. So I think it's about framing potentially the conversation for the finance person to say what your cost is today, out of pocket, versus what your cost could be if that person is not prepared to retire on time.
Absolutely.
Jen Stevens, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.